What's good? What's good? Shalom. Yeah, I know y'all see the title, right? Um, Hold on. Shalakia. Fix this. Boom. Oh yeah, I know y'all see the title. We're gonna deal with the serpent in the garden, right? So yeah, we're gonna deal with the serpent in the garden because a lot of our people is under the understanding that it was the actual talking snake. That it was that some would probably say at one point in time snakes walked had two legs, then all of a sudden now they're crawling on their bellies and all that crazy stuff. So we're gonna break it all down. So, but to get an understanding, right? Because we dealing with a group of people called the Adamites, right? And the Adamites are the people where Adam comes from, right? And all of their descendants. And we did a lesson on creation before when we touched on that Adam and Eve had parents, right? You know, so they had parents. They wasn't the first two people walking on the planet and all that cool stuff. They had parents, right? Because when God created people, He created a plethora of us. It wasn't just one man, one woman. It was He created all types of people groups during that time, right? He just chose the Adamites to be the ones that run everything, control everything. Just like, because the Adamites look at it like this. It's a word called prototype, right? Meaning first of its kind, right? So now the Adamites were basically like prototype Israelites, because just like how God chose to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, He chose the Israelites to be the top hegemony, to rule everything when everything is all said and done. He chose Adam and the Adamites to rule everything during that time, right? So, and a lot of these, nations, that was pre-flood, because the flood happened and a lot of those, those nations, all got destroyed except for the line of Shem. And so then from Shem, that's where you get Noah and his three sons, and then everything gets repopulated again, right? So you have prototype nations. So now on this side of the flood, you have the nations that we have now, and they were prototypes, right? And so this is so in a nutshell, like so-called Europeans will be the prototype, will be the on this side of the flood version of the descendants of Cain, right? Because they share the same attributes as Cain, right? The Canaanites, the Cains, Canaanites, they would be the prototype so-called white man, European, Caucasian, right? Then the Adamites will be the so-called prototype, will be the prototype of the Israelites, right? So, like I said, so we're gonna get further into it. We're gonna break it all down. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Of course, all praises to the Most High. We do so in His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, right? So, let's get it. We're gonna start at Genesis. Start at Genesis chapter 3, right? Verse 1, right? So we're going to start there first, right? Pick it up there. So, and it reads, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord had made. Now, right? So now this is where people get tripped up at. Because you got to understand the terminologies of the Bible, especially Genesis. Genesis is a true story that's written in allegory. So it's a lot of metaphors and dark sayings that is being spoken about here. So you have to understand the terminology. So the Bible oftentimes referred to us as beasts, grass, stars, um, trees, uh, like bodies of water, like the sea, mountains. So those are all terminologies you would see in the Bible that refers to people. So when it says that the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, meaning this guy was very slick with his words, very cunning, very intelligent on his manner of speaking, right? But just like now, how if somebody is sneaky or underhand, you'll call them a snake. I'm like, oh, this person's a snake. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same terminology. So you just have to understand, like, how we talk is how they talk. Of course, once you get through the old English and you understand it, you see that these are our people talking. And you know how we talk. We always speak with metaphors, right? So let's moving on. So it says the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, have God said ye shall not eat of every tree in the garden, right? So now the trees, what are the trees? Like we just went over all these different terminologies that explain people. Trees are nations of people. That's what the trees are in the garden. They're not just literal trees like you will see, because like I said, we're reading a true story written in allegorical, right? So trees are nations, and we're gonna prove that as we go along. So, and what is being said here? What is being said here is God extracted the Adamites. Okay, you living amongst all these different nations in the garden. You can hang out and deal with these type of people. Y'all can trade. Y'all can share. Y'all can work with each other. You can do this with these people, but it's a certain group of people that I don't want y'all to deal with. That's what's being said here, right? So it's not like it was some type of mystical tree or something like that. No, it was a group of people that was practicing and living a certain type of way that God did not want the Adamites to get involved with and start learning their customs and their ways, right? So then it says, and the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of every fruit of the tree in the garden. So, like I said, they would have you think that they're just going around picking fruit and just eating stuff. No, this is talking about exchanging knowledge amongst different groups of people. Like if you go to a different country, they got different ways of practicing. They got different philosophies. Then you may learn a little something. Like you go to China, you might learn their customs. You might put on their little traditional garb. You might eat with chopsticks. You might go to a dojo. I don't know, whatever, right? So like that, right? So that's what it means by to eat of every tree, meaning to learn from them, to exchange knowledge, right? So it says, and the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of every tree of the fruit of the tree in the garden, but the tree which is in the midst of the garden, uh, God have said we shall not eat of it, neither shall we touch it. Right now, just check this out. So where is the garden at? The garden is what we would call the fertile crescent, right? And when you understand the land mass that God promised to Abraham and to the Israelites is from the Nile River all the way to the Euphrates River. That makes up the land of Israel, aka the Fertile Crescent, aka the Garden of Eden, right? So now, who's in the midst of the Garden of Eden? Because remember, we're dealing with prototype nations. So these nations that live pre-flood, these are the prototype. Because God, like all these, because when you read Ecclesiastes, people regenerate, their souls regenerate, right? So, so these is pre-flood people, But on the other side of the flood, the same spirits is here, you know, living out through these different nations of people that walks with us, right? So now, who's in the midst of the garden? You have Israel, right? You have the nation of Israel, because and then you also have the Canaanites, because when Israel left out of Egypt, they went into the land of Canaan, which would be AKA Israel, and then they were already living there. Then when you follow the story, they basically end up living amongst us, even though we came and dominated the land and took it, but they end up living amongst us. So that is that tree that's in the midst of the garden. It is the prototype Canaanites, right? So, of course, they wasn't called Canaanites during this time that we're reading, but we we are explaining it like this to make it more understandable. So those would be the prototype Canaanites, right? So it says, "But the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, yes, unless ye die." So what does that mean, right? Just get something real quick. Let's go to Deuteronomy, the first chapter. I mean, not the first chapter. Deuteronomy 7, real quick, because that sounds familiar when you understand the commandments that God gave to the Israelites. Um, this it sounds very familiar what He told them once before. So this is how we know who is the serpent, what people group fit the serpent, right? So it says, when the Lord thy God when the Lord thy God bring thee into the land where thou goest to possess it, and have cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites and the Hittites and the Gergesites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. So these are the Canaanite nations that's living in the midst of this garden, right? And so, like I said, we're prototype, right? Because of course, pre-flood they wasn't called Canaanites. So these are the nations that's living in the midst of this garden, and this is very similar to what he instructed Adam and Eve, right? Not very similar, but basically is the same, right? So let's read on, and it says, "Deliver them before thee, and thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt not make no covenant with them, no covenant." So how she said we able to we can eat with them, right? She said we can eat of all these trees, right? So back here it says we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, right? But the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, which is the prototype Canaanites, God said, "Ye shall not eat." And what it says over here, it says, "Neither shall thou make no covenant with them." So to eat is to exchange knowledge, to make a covenant with them. Then it says, uh, "With them, nor show mercy unto them. Thou shalt not make marriages with them." Then it says over here, "Thou shalt not eat it, nor shall y'all touch it." So touching is deals with physical contact. Laying with them, giving your sons to their sons, taking their daughters to be your to your for your sons, right? But then just get back over here. It says, "Neither should thou make marriages with them. Thy daughters thy shall not give to unto thy sons, nor thy daughters shall be given to thy sons." Right? So it says, "Thy daughter shall not be given unto his sons, nor his daughter shall be given unto thy sons. For they will turn thy son from following me." So what happens when Adam and Eve ate those ate the fruit, right? Started learning the knowledge. They turned away from following God, right? That's what happened. So it says, "Neither should ye touch it, lest ye die," right? So, and that's what happened, because when you stop following the ways of God, because what they say, um, the the wages of sin is death, right? So it says, "Neither should thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou should not give unto his son, nor his daughter shall thou take unto thy son, for they will turn thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly." Right. So that's what happens. So that's what we're reading here when it says, the woman said unto the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees." Talking about we can deal with these other nations. We can have dealings with them. We can you know learn from each other, right? We can do trade. We can have some type of business, right? So we may eat of the other tree of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Lord God said, ye should not eat of it, neither should thou touch it, lest ye die. So basically saying don't have no type of covenant, no type of dealing with these groups of people, because once you start learning their customs and their ways, that's going to draw you far away from me. So that is what God is telling them. The same thing he told the Israelites in Deuteronomy chapter 7, right? So then read it on. And the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die, right? So now let's think about this line right here. Powerful line. Because, the story we've been told, they say was sin enter into the world, right? Because of, what Adam and Eve did, right? So now what is the world? The world is the world of Israel, the Fertile Crescent, right? Israel, because it tells you that in Isaiah 45 and 17 what the world is. The world is the world of Israel, right? So if that's the case, if the world, because Adam and Eve didn't eat the fruit yet, they didn't start learning these different customs yet. So if we're gonna use that logic, then basically, because the serpent right here that's talking to Eve is wicked because he's already lying. So we can't just say that, oh, because sin is a lying is a sin, right? So we can't, have that misunderstanding that we're taught that, well, okay, well, sin enter into the world at this time, because it was obviously bad stuff going on during this time, because this serpent, this person, is already lying. So it didn't enter into the what we think of the world when Adam and Eve did it, because we see him lying right here. It says, the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die, right? So the world is the world of Israel. Like I said, we can prove that with Isaiah um, 45 and 17 real quick. Let's just get there just really, really quick. Because I don't like to say stuff and don't be able to prove it. Right here, Isaiah 45 and 17. But Israel should be saved in the Lord with everlasting salvation, and ye shall not be ashamed, nor confounded world without end. So Israel is that world that you think about when you read John 3:16. It's talking about God so loved the world. It's talking about the world of Israel, and we can prove that also, and we have many times. So, but back to the lesson, because I don't want to get too thrown off. So then, it says, and the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely die. But God do knoweth the day ye eat thereof, when your eyes will be open, and you shall be gods, knowing good and evil. Right. So what is that good and evil? Because at this time, Adam and Eve, they only experience good. Right. They don't know what hardship is. They don't know what a hard time is, because all the way up to this point, God says do this, and they did that, and they did what God told them to do. So they was getting the blessings, right? So now these people are practicing a different way of life. They're doing things that's contrary to God. They're, you know, doing child sacrifice. They're doing all these type of crazy ways of getting down. They're cutting themselves. They're doing bloodletting and all this crazy stuff, right? So it says, so it's basically saying that, look, you're gonna have a way, basically telling her you have a way better experience. You're gonna broaden your knowledge, you know, once you start practicing this and learning this, because then you're gonna have a little bit of this, you're gonna have a little bit of that, right? That's basically what he's saying, right? So it says, for God doeth know in the day that ye eat thereof, your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Meaning you're gonna be twice as better. You're gonna understand. You're gonna have this knowledge, right? So now, like I said, in Sunday school, they'll teach you that it was like some type of apple that these people was eating. So that's the case. I mean, we'll be all walking around here being enlightened and geniuses or whatever. Because I mean, I'm pretty sure we all ate an apple before, right? So, like I said, it's not dealing with the actual fruit. It's talking about those certain nations' wisdoms, customs, uh, and cultures that they partake in, and then you taking on those cultures and practices, and you incorporating it into what you do. That's what it's speaking of, right? So, like I said, because this book is written in allegorical, but it's a true story told in metaphor form. So you just have to break through the understand the dark sands, right? So we can have a clear understanding of what is actually being told to us. So it says, and when a woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes, meaning she liked how, dude laid it down to her, presented it to her like, no, this type of knowledge, this type of wisdom. And our people get seduced all the time. Our people, I said this before, our people love fantasy more than truth. You can tell somebody uh, people love to lie more than the truth. So you can tell somebody a fantastic lie, and they can probably know that you're lying to them, but it's gonna be cool for the simple fact that it sounds nice, it's pleasant. What I'm saying, it sounds sweet to the ear, so you're not gonna be too upset about it. So and so that's how it goes. So that's where it says, and the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree be desired to make one wise. Meaning she felt like she can, incorporate this type of knowledge and wisdom into her everyday thing, and it'll probably empower her and better her, right? So, cause remember, we're dealing with cultures and customs and knowledge and wisdom, not actual fruit, right? So it says, so when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eye, and the tree be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Meaning she came and taught him, like, hey, look, I just learned this new such and such. I know what we got going on. We can take this and put it in with this. It could probably make everything a little more better, more stronger, more conducive. You know what I'm saying? Make this stuff work, right? So that's what ended up happening, right? So it says, and their eyes were both open, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and make themselves aprons. So now what happened there, right? So like I said, in Sunday school they would teach that they just running around bucket naked. You know what I'm saying? There's everything out swinging and dingling and swingling, right? Swinging and banging, right? But no, this is talking about philosophies, right? Because remember, we're dealing with metaphor, metaphorical way speech, right? So it says, "And the eyes were, and the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked." And what do they mean by they knew they were naked? Meaning, like, dang, once they start getting into it, and then they start actually, they knew that they was doing something against what God told them to do, basically, to shorten it up. So it won't be too long winded. They was basically knew that God told them to do this and that, but once they started getting into doing that, they knew that they was wrong, right? They knew that, dang, this is not what God wanted us to do, you know. So then it says that they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So what that is, like I said, they wasn't running around bucket naked. So what they did was they took whatever they already knew from what they learned from God, and they took what they just learned from over there, and all the other nations that they was dealing with, the other cultures and philosophies, and they blended it all together, and they made them, and they clothed themselves with that type of wisdom. That's what it is. Basically, it's talking about being clothed with wisdom. It's not actually talking about putting on clothing like they're running around looking like Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. No, they already had clothes. That was already a thing. Because when you think about it, just think about it logically. The first thing a person do, like let's just say you take yourself, you put yourself on an island. First thing you're gonna do, you're gonna find yourself food and shelter. Then you're gonna, try to find your, have you some clothes because winter, the seasons change, so you're gonna have to have warm clothing. So it wasn't that people just wasn't just running around here naked. So it's talking about them clothing themselves with the knowledge and wisdom and understanding of that particular nation, and they was mixing things together. That's how they end up coming. That's why it's phrased like aprons, right? Because they put everything that they learned together and try to cover themselves with it to try to blend with the knowledge, right? So let's prove that. Let's jump to Luke real quick. Let's get Luke 10 and 16. What's the one I went? Hold on. Yeah, Luke 10 and 16. And it says, and he that heareth you, heareth me. Right? Hold on. Hold on. All right, hold on. I'm jumping the gun. Hold on. Just get the next verse first. Then we get that one. I don't want to jump the gun. So then it says, and they heard the voice of the Lord walking in the garden. Right? So what is the voice of the Lord? The voice of the Lord are the prophets of God. It wasn't like God Almighty, Yahweh, was just walking around in the garden with them, like how they would teach us in Sunday school. No. The voice of the Lord is the prophets, and it's always have been the prophets. Now just prove it. Now we can get Luke 10 and 16. Well, let's go to Jeremiah 15 and 19 first. Then we get Luke. So we got to understand what this voice of the Lord is, right? And it says, Jeremiah 15 and 19. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, if thou return, and I will bring again. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, if thou return, then I will bring thee again, and thou shalt stand before me. If thou take forth the precious of the vow. Because that's what was happening. Those prophets was cursing these people out for taking on these different cultures and of that nation that God told them not to. It wasn't that God was actually, you know, down there speaking, because the Bible tells you that the earth can't contain the Lord. You read that in Acts, that, and then also in the Kings, it tells you that the earth can't contain God. The Bible tells you that the earth is God's footstool. So I mean, unless you can fit your whole body on your footstool, I mean, I don't know how else to. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can shrink yourself and fit yourself on the footstool all the way. But anywho, so it says, therefore, thus saith the Lord, and return when I bring thee, and thou shalt stand before me, and if thou take forth the precious of the vow, thou shalt be of my mouth. Let let them return unto thee, and return not unto them. Right. So these were the prophets that was speaking to the people, right? And cursing them out for taking on these different cultures. Let's prove that further. Now just get Luke 10 and 16. So Luke 10 and 16 says, he have heard, he that heard, hear you, hear me, and he that despise you, despise me, and he that despise me, despise him that sent me, right? So it's talking about the prophets. The prophets is the one that's doing the speaking. Whenever you read the Bible and it says, thus said the Lord, or the Lord God said this, he's always speaking through the prophets, right? Let's prove that further. Let's get Luke 1 and 60, 1 and 70, right? Chapter 1, verse 70. Then it says, as he spake by the mouth of his prophets. So what is the voice of the Lord? What is the mouth of the Lord? Let's get jump back over there. Boom, boom, boom. And it says, and they heard the voice of the Lord, right? What is the voice of the Lord? Luke 1 and 70. As he spake by the mouth of his prophets, which have been since the world began. So what is the beginning? We're reading the beginning right now in Genesis. That's what the world began. So God was not walking in the garden with them because the Bible told you his spirit is too big for this planet. That the earth cannot contain the spirit of God, right? That's why he speaks through his prophets and he speaks through different vessels that he chooses to uh, to interact with, right? So it says, and he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which has been since the world began, right? So that's what it was when it says that, and they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. So, and we went over that the trees of the garden are the other nations, the other people groups. So they try to just blend in with everybody else. You know, have you ever been looking for somebody, right? You be out looking for somebody, and then it's then they be trying to blend in with the crowd so they won't be seen by you. Like say like somebody owe you some money, right? And then you out and about, then they try to hold their head down, walk real fast, walk real close to another person so you won't see them blending in with them. That's what they were doing. They was trying to blend in with the other nations and with the word is call them describe them as trees, like we went over earlier, that the different terminologies that we see. The Bible oftentimes refer to people as trees, grass, uh, mountains, seas, stars, and animals, so and so forth, right? So then it says, and the Lord, and the Lord thy God called unto Adam and said to him, "Where art thou?" Meaning, like I've been looking for you. Like what you want, right? Just like you saw the movie Juice when Tupac was looking when Bishop was looking for a Q. Like, man, where you been? Like I've been looking for you, right? So that's what it was on. He was looking for them, and then it says, and he said, "I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." So he's like, "Man, look, I knew I was wrong. I heard, you cursing everybody out, you getting on everybody for taking all these different customs. All the Adamites picking up all these customs, right? So I was afraid, so I hid myself. I tried to, get little, right? So then, and he said, who told you that you were naked? Hast thou eaten from the tree where I command thee that thou should not shouldest not eat, right? So so he's like, man, you because like I said, they understood once they started doing with that other nation that was in the midst of the garden, which was the serpent, right? Those people, they knew that they was wrong because they would start going against what God told them to do, right? Then it says, then the man said, "The woman who thou gave me, she she gave me of the tree and I did eat." So now he's trying to blame the woman. Now he's trying to blame, like, well, shoot, the woman that you gave me, she the one got me into all this, because that's how we do a lot of times. We always try to pass the buck. We always want to blame the next person, right? When Adam was supposed to be the man and actually stand and actually knew what was right and should have told her, like, no, we're not dealing with that, like, no, that's not what we do over here. But no, you know he like, all right, okay, whatever, what they say, happy wife, happy life. He was in that type of spirit. But then you see what happened, right? So then the Lord God said unto the woman, what have thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat. So now she like, what should I? The serpent told me it was cool, because that's what the word beguile means. Beguile means to seduce, means spiritually to seduce. So meaning how somebody can make a idea or something sounds so attractive to you that you be like, no, excuse me, that you be like, yeah, yeah, I'll try it. Yeah, I'll do it. So that's what it means by to be beguiled. And the Lord said unto the serpent, because thou have done this, thou shalt be art cursed above all cattle. Right? So now, like I said, is a serpent a cattle? So this is how we have to understand the Bible, because we understand that when God speaks about people, oftentimes he used mountains to describe people, uh, seas, cattle, like we just seen here, like animals, uh, stars, grass, and trees, right? Oftentimes. So those are the terminology that you see in the Bible that is being used when it's often talking about people. So, and we know a snake is a reptile biologically. So it's not cattle, sheep, cows, bulls, buffaloes. Those are cattle, right? So that's how we know that this is not talking about that, right? Then it says, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field upon the belly thou shalt go, and dust shall eat all the days of thy life. Right? So that's deep. Just think about that for a minute. Right? Because, like, again, we're not talking about a talking snake. Nobody knows any. You can't. I'm pretty sure we all probably went to a zoo before. We all saw Animal Planet. You can't find that one snake that eats dirt, right? So it's not talking about that. It's talking about a group of people, a nation of people, and their curse. And then this curse that God put on the prototype Canaanites, is going to take effect in these last days when the kingdom is set up again. We're gonna get into that, right? We're gonna break it all down further, right? So it says, on thy belly thou shalt go, and thus shalt thou eat all the days of thy life, right? So, and what does this mean, right? Because, like I said, they would have you think that snakes was walking around on two legs, then all of a sudden, zap, now they have no legs, like that the song that Eddie Murphy was singing on Trading Places. I have no legs, I have no legs, I have no legs. That didn't happen, right? Let's get Isaiah 30. Isaiah 30 and 6. Let's see what this talking about, sir. Because when you get into the book of Isaiah, um, especially like in the latter chapters, like from Isaiah 37 all the way on, you know, it really give you more context on the end times and the end days and how all these nations are going to be sorted out and how things is going to play out, right? So just get it in Isaiah 30 and 6, right? And it says, the burden of the beasts of the south, right? Again, the word beast is talking about people, not talking about animals. So it's the burden of the beasts of the south unto the land of trouble and anguish, from hence come a young and old lion. And a viper and fiery serpents, they will carry their riches upon the shoulders of young asses, and their treasures upon bunches of camel, to the people that shall not profit them. Right. So it's talking about, you know, in this part, it's basically talking about these nations coming into Israel and taking their things, right? And at the end, they're taking all these things and they doing all this stuff. They robbing Israel, but in the end, it says, shall not profit them, right? So they're not going to profit at the end because God's coming back to judge these people, right? So let's get um let's get Jeremiah 4 real quick. Jeremiah 4 and 7. Jeremiah 4:7 says, the lion come up with his tickle, and the destroyer of Gentiles is on his way. He is gone forth from his place to make thy land desolate, and thy cities shall be laid to waste without inhabitants. Right? So, like I said, so this is like I said, so you see the lion is talking about, because Israel is often, well, Judah, the tribe of Judah is often referred to as a lion, right? It says that the destroyer of Gentiles, and his destroyer of Gentiles is on his way, and he come forth. And who's the destroyer of Gentiles? Yahweh Shai, right? Who the world ignorantly calls Jesus, right? And make forth of his way to desolate in the cities. Hold on, let me read this right. Hold on, rephrase, retract, and correct myself. So now this is actually talking about Nebuchadnezzar, right? Because Nebuchadnezzar, um, pardon me, Nebuchadnezzar, had, you go to ancient Babylon, you have those agriffas. Those agriffas are lions with the little eagle wings on them, right? So yeah, scratch that earlier thing I said. So it's actually talking about. I have to read it again. So it's actually talking about Babylon coming in to destroy Israel, right? And it's likening them into a lion, right? And calling them destroyer of the Gentiles, right? Because Babylon took over a lot of nations during that time, right? Because it became a uh, great empire, right? So, let's get Isaiah 65:21 real quick. So, like I said, we see as we reading this, though, right? We see that this is talking about people. It's not talking about some type of uh, talking snake and all that cool stuff. It's talking about people. So let's get Isaiah 65:21 real quick, right? Isaiah 65:21, and it reads, it says, "And ye shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat of the fruit of them, and they shall not build in another. Well, and they should not build in another inhabit. They should not plant uh, in another eat as the day." So this is talking about in the kingdom when Israel is back established in their land. When we're back in our land, basically saying that we're going to prosper and we don't have to worry about nobody coming in taking our stuff, or we working for somebody else benefit. And whatever we work for, we have to give it to them. So that's what it's talking about. So it says they should not build in another inhabit, they should not plant in another eat. For as the days of the tree are the days of my people, and my elect shall long enjoy work of their hands, and they shall not labor in vain, nor uh, bring forth for trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of Yahweh, and their offsprings with them. And it shall come to pass before they call, I will answer, and will they and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Right? So God saying is, we ain't gonna want for nothing in those days, right? The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like a bullock. Dust shall be the serpent's meat, right? So who's the serpent? So this is getting back into the garden, because you remember the curse of the serpent was to eat the dust of his belly, but it haven't happened yet. This is talking about a certain particular African nations, right? that's going to be at the bottom of society when this whole everything, when the dust settled after World War III happened, after Armageddon, Second Coming, Israel back in their land, and now we're ruling everything, and we're the superpower. Then it's telling you that the bottom of society is going to be these people that caused this whole trouble from the get go that we read about in Genesis, which is a particular African nation that was descendants of the Canaanites, right? So it says, and the wolf and the lamb shall feed together. So this is talking about nations, talking about, a nation that was once fierce and violent, and then another nation that's, a little weaker. They're going to be able to hang out together. They're going to be able to be at peace with each other. There's no longer a nation is going to be dominating other nations, other than Israel controlling everything. But no other nation is going to be doing that. America is not going to be going telling other nations how to run their country. That's not going to happen, right? So that's what it means when it says the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat the straw like the bullock, and the dust shall be the serpent's meat, right? So it's getting into the curse that God put on the serpent in the garden that we read, right? And like I said, this is a particular African nation that's from that is from the Canaanites, right? So those are the people that God cursed forever, the Canaanites, right? Then it says, they shall not hurt nor destroy in my holy mountain, said Yahweh, right? So that's what is going to happen. They're not going to. It's going to be in peace, and then that nation who God pronounced judgment against, those Canaanites, they're going to be at a very low state. Let me see, find this one real quick. Then we already know that Esau is going to be exterminated, right? Pursuant to Obadiah and uh, and elsewhere, right? So let's get Zechariah. What I want? Let's get Zechariah 21. Zechariah 21 says, "Yeah, every plot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts. And all the day that sacrifice shall come and take them, and seeth wherein that the day shall be no more of the Canaanites in the house of the Lord." So the Canaanites cannot come to the temple. They're not. They're not allowed on the grounds. They're not allowed on the premises. And who are the Canaanites? A particular group of an African nation, right? Those are the Canaanites. So it says, and read it again. It says, and every plot in Jerusalem, every plot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts, and all they that sacrifice shall come and take them, and take them and take them and see if therein in that the day that there shall be no more of the Canaanite in the house of the Lord. Because like I said, throughout the land of Israel, and when you read the Bible, the Canaanites dwelt amongst us. But now they're going to be put out of the holy sanctuary. They're not going to be able to come into the land of Israel. They're going to be on the outskirts of the world, right? And then just get this real quick, because it said, it says, and all they that sacrifice, right? Because a lot of people will tell you, the church will tell you that the laws is done away with. Then you have some people think that we don't have to keep the laws, but even in the kingdom of heaven, we're going to be keeping the law. So we read this real quick, and this is Zechariah 14 and 16, and it says, "And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations, meaning after World War III and Armageddon, there's still gonna be some people left. The ones that survive this war and survive Armageddon says, and it shall come to pass, everyone that left in the nation which came against Jerusalem, because they're gonna fight against us. And you read about that in Ezekiel 38 and Second Ezra 13. It says, and it shall come to pass, everyone that left of the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go from 1 year to year to worship the King. Who's the King? Yahushua, who the world mistakenly called Jesus, the Lord of hosts, Yahweh, and keep the feast of tabernacle. Right, so they're gonna be required to keep our holidays, the feast of tabernacle. Then it says, and who shall be, and it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King and Yahweh of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So if they don't come and worship our God, if they don't praise Yahweh Shai as the King and worship our God Yahweh, what it says, upon them shall be no rain. What happens to a nation if it doesn't rain for a substantial amount of time? Drought happens. Then what happens when drought happens? Starvation happens. That's called famine. So if these nations do not keep the law and do not worship our God, and even after all this stuff is settled, God is gonna put starvation on them and cause their land to have a drought and don't bring rain to them, right? But as we read over in 21, the Canaanites not required to do that because they're not even allowed to come to the land of Israel. They're not even allowed to come to the temple, right? It's going to be illegal for them to be around. It says, and see if therein, and that the day shall be no more Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts, right? So they ain't got to worry about this rule right here in verse 16 because it doesn't apply to them, right? Let's get some more on it. Let's get Ezekiel 47. Ezekiel 47, and just start at 6. Ezekiel 47 and 6 says, and he said unto me, Son of man, have thou seen this? And he brought me and caused me to turn in a bank of a river. Right? So what is this river? This river is talking about knowledge and wisdom, right? Because you read about this river in Revelation. Just keep going. And when I had turned, behold, the bank of the river were many trees. So what is these many trees? We told you in Genesis what these trees are. These trees are nations, right? These many trees are nations that's coming to learn from the Israelites, right? Because we have the knowledge, we have the wisdom. God is going to give us that light in that day that you read about in Isaiah 65. That God is going to give us that light. I mean, Isaiah 60. That we're going to have that light, right? So it says, and he said unto me, Son of man, have thou seen this? And he brought me and caused me to return to the brink of the river. And when I had returned, and behold, at the bank of the river were many trees on the on side of the river. So these many nations is coming to learn. But we just read in Zechariah 14 and 21, but the Canaanites can't come. Why they can't come? Because what they did in Genesis chapter 3 caused the whole world to go array. Because, if they never, because Adam and Eve was supposed to rule this whole thing. Everything's supposed to be a perfect paradise. But then these Canaanites, the serpent seed, they put, they disrupted all of that, right? So that's why they're not allowed to be a part of this new world, right? Then it says, and now when I have returned, and behold, at the bank of the river were many trees on the other side of the and and on the other, meaning all these nations from everywhere coming to learn. Then then uh, said he unto me, these rivers issue out towards the east country and go down unto the desert and go down into the sea, right? And go down to the sea, was being brought forth unto the sea, the waters shall be healed. So we're going to be teaching these nations properly, giving them proper understanding of the world, giving them real knowledge and wisdom, right? And it's going to heal them. They're not going to be following and making up their own belief systems and having these false ideologies. It's going to be our job to teach them correctly, you know, after we subject them to us, because they're not going to just come under our wings automatically. They're going to have to be subject to us, like we read in Jeremiah 14:2, Revelation 2:26. So they're not going to just humble down like, oh, just go learn. I mean, some of them are, but that's not going to be the general consensus that they're just going to want to learn from a bunch of Negroes and in the sticks, right? That's not how it's going down. So it says, then he said unto me, these waters issue out towards the east country, and go down unto the desert, and go into the sea, which bring forth unto the sea, and the waters should be healed. Right? Let's get Revelation 17 and 15 real quick. Let's see what these waters that heal is talking about. Revelation 17 and 15. And it says, um, and he said unto me, the water which thou sawest where the whore, boom, 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 that's the one I want. Hold on, see, make sure, boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And he said unto me, the waters which thou seest, that thou sawest where the whore sit, are people. So who's the whore, right? The whore is America. America sits on these waters. Because remember, waters is talking about nations of people, right? In this context. Because remember, we keep repeating it over that water is another terminology that the Bible used to describe people and nations. So America sits on over these different nations. That's why I said earlier that America is not going to no longer be able to tell other countries how to run their business, right? So it says, and he said unto me, the water which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are people and multitudes of nations and tongues, right? So that's what this water is, right? And those are what's going to be held. They're going to be held through our teachings, right? Let's get it. So then it says, and it shall come to pass that every thing that liveth that moveth, war, whether whatsoever the river shall come, shall live, and shall be shall very great multitude of fish, right? So talking about it's going to be very diverse people, because now fish is being used to describe people, right? Multitude of fish, talking about it's going to be a lot of people, right? That's coming to learn and to get this knowledge and wisdom and understand, right? And it says, there shall be a great multitude of fish, because these waters shall come hither, for they shall be healed, and everything shall live, in the whether in the river cometh, right? Because that river that's flowing is that wisdom and knowledge that we're gonna be kicking to them in that day, and we're gonna be explaining to them how this thing really works. We're gonna give them the secrets of the universe, right? You no longer have to, watch those little crazy videos that be talking some crazy stuff. We're gonna have the knowledge, right? In that day, we're gonna know what's going on, and it's gonna be our job to teach the people, right? So that's what we're reading here. We're reading things that's gonna take place in the kingdom, right? And so it says, and shall be healed, and everything shall live, whether in the river cometh, right? Let's get Revelation 2 and 22 and 1 real quick. Then it says, Revelation 22 and 1 says, and he showed me a pure river. What is that pure river? That knowledge, that wisdom, that understanding. So he showed me that pure river of life, clear as crystal. Why is it clear as crystal? Because you're going to understand it. It's not going to be something that is going to be hard to understand. Once you that wisdom, that knowledge hits you, it's going to be like a light bulb pop in your head. You're going to understand it. That's why it's crystal clear. This is what it's talking about. So it says, so we're going to teach these people a clear and understanding of the truth, right? That's what they're going to get. So it says, and he showed me a pure river of water of life, and a clear and crystal proceeding out of the throne of God and from the Lamb, right? So, like again, talking about that knowledge that we're receiving from the Father, and we're going forth and teaching these other nations the proper thing, right? Because the Bible tells us that we're going to be a light to the Gentile. And what's a light to the Gentile? The light is that wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that we have, that we're, in that we're going to go forth and teach to other people, right? So it says, in the midst of the street of it, and either side of the river was there trees, was the tree of life, which bare 12 manners of fruit. So it's talking about that knowledge, that wisdom that the 12 tribes is going to possess in that day, right? And it says, which bear 12 manners of fruit and yield her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for healing the nations. So what comes from trees? Leaves. And what is so that's the leaves is dealing with philosophies. So the philosophies and the teachings, right? So we're going to be bringing them the philosophies and the teachings of the Most High God, Yahweh, and the Son Yahweh Shai. We're going to teach these other people the proper way in that day, right? Then it says, bring forth the healing of the nations, right? And when we teach them, it's going to heal them, because they're like we read earlier. It's going to be a crystal understanding, because it says right here, the water of life, clear as crystal, meaning it's going to be very easy for them to get it in that day. Because now, you try to explain certain things to people, it's hard for them to understand what's going on, right? Because, like I said, in that, because for the most part, God having, don't give certain people that spirit to understand. But in that day, it's gonna be so crystal clear that you're gonna get it. You're not gonna be the dumb kid in the classroom that just can't get it. You know, you're gonna get it, right? So let's keep moving. And it says, and it shall come to pass. This is back in Ezekiel 47, verse 10. It shall come to pass that the fishers shall stand upon it, and the LGD, even unto Gilgalam, they shall be a place to spread forth nets, and the fish shall be according to their kind. Meaning, you know, all nations going to be, they're going to be together in their own separate, respective, you know, areas, or but they're still going to be taught. So that's what I mean by like all the fish is going to be. It says all the fish according to their kinds, meaning this nation is going to be, they're going to be with their own people. That nation going to be with their own people, but we're going to go out and teach them the knowledge and wisdom of that God wants, that gave to us to give to them, right? Then it says of their kind, of the great sea exceeding many, right? So many people is going to learn from us. But now this is back to the prototype Canaanites, back to the curse of Cain being eaten of the dust, right? Uh, being that serpent that's gonna have to crawl on his belly and eat the dust, right? So this is getting right back to it. It says, but the Murray places thereof and the marshes shall thereof shall not be healed. They shall be given salt. So that's what type of water these Canaanite people is gonna get. They're gonna get salt water. Now ask yourself a question: can you drink salt water? No. You can barely gargle with salt water. right? I mean, that's about it that you can do. You can gargle with the salt water, wash it around your mouth, spit it back out, but you can't drink it, right? It'll kill you. So it says the Murray places. Now, what is the Murray? You got to look that word up. The Murray means swamp. So what lives in the swamp? Snakes. So what did the Bible say will be on their belly? The Canaanites, and they will be, and what do you call them? Serpents, snakes. So it says, therefore, the marshes. There says, but the Murray places, the swamp areas thereof, in the marshes. Marshes is wetland and muddy. Muddy places. Just a whole bunch of mud. You know, thereof shall be not healed. Why didn't won't be healed? Because we read in Zechariah that the Canaanites can't come to the kingdom. They cannot come into the congregation of the Lord. They can't come into the temple. They can't do nothing but this live on the outskirts of the world, right? And it says, should not be healed. They should be given salt, right? Why are they going to be given salt? Because that's what the Most High said so, right? They're going to be given salt because that's what, because for what they did to us in the garden and what the havoc that they caused into this world and caused through the whole world until a tailspin by corrupting Adam and Eve with their doctrine that they brought to them. So that is their curse. That's why. So they wasn't cursed when you read Genesis. They wasn't cursed at that instant. This is a long thing that had to play out through centuries, and then they're gonna get that curse when the kingdom is started. Right? They're gonna be at the bottom. Right? So let's get boom, boom, boom. Let's get Genesis real quick. Something I seen too though. Hold on. So yeah, let's get Genesis 9 and 27 real quick. I'm just looking at something else real fast. But yeah, let's get Genesis 9 and 27 really quick. Genesis 9 and 27. And it reads, God enlarged Japhet, and God, God shall enlarge Japhet, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant, right? Because let's start at 25. And he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, and he shall be unto his brethren. So, like I said, so Canaan, that same spirit from the garden, that's who the serpent, is. So we see that Canaan has that curse that he has to fulfill, and it's going to come to fruition in these when the kingdom is set up, right? And it says, jump down. God shall enlarge Japhet and shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant, right? So you notice it didn't say anything about Ham, because in the church they want to teach black people that we're Ham. We're not Ham. We're actually Semitic, right? And but then even if you want to say that, the curse doesn't involve Ham. It involves Canaan, right? So that's how that works. So let's get hold on before we go back to that. Just want to check something else out again. Bear with me, bear with me. Okay, I guess that's it. Boom, boom, boom. All right. So now let's read back to Ezekiel 47, verse 12. And a river upon the bank thereof on the side and on that side shall grow all trees for meat. Meaning they're going to be able to take what we learn, the knowledge that we give them, and it's going to better them. It's going to make them stronger. It's going to strengthen them. It's going to heal them, like it said earlier. Those leaves shall not fade, neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. Meaning they're not going to be able to just soak up all this knowledge and wisdom, and it's always going to be stuff that they can learn, and they're going to improve them and get them better, right? That's what it means by it's not going to be consumed, meaning, it's always going to be here. Nobody's going to come and take it and steal it and burn it, you know, destroy anything. It's always going to be here. So it says, shall be, neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. It shall bring forth new fruit according to its months, because the waters shall they issue out of the sanctuary of the fruit thereof shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof for medicine. So, like I said, we're gonna heal the nations in those days, right? And they're not gonna be able to, like I said, the Canaanites is not gonna be able to take this, receive this knowledge and information. They're gonna be left in perpetual uh downtrodden state, and so they're gonna be at the bottom of the bottom. They're gonna be living like in the backwoods type stuff, and like I said, and so they're gonna be given water, but it's gonna be salt water, meaning it's not gonna be really conducive and really enough to lift them out of that spiritual, that spiritual, what's the word I'm looking for, not going to really, get them spiritually, sustain them spiritually enough to where they can actually, be productive and carry that wisdom and knowledge, because like the Bible says, they're going to be given salt water, while everybody else is getting that crystal clear water, right? That righteous understanding. So that is their curse, that for them doing what they did to us, and not just us, you know, what they did to us, taking down God's people, right? See, I almost got caught up in that whole. That's why I have to catch myself, because remember we were saying earlier about the world was Israel. See, that shows you the effect of Christianity. It almost got me to say all of us when it was just basically focusing on the Adamites, right? So, like I said, so I hope that was educational, informative, all that cool stuff. We have a better understanding of what the snake is in the garden. It's not a actual talking snake. It's not a snake that used to have legs. Now it don't. It's talking about a nation of people. Uh, More specifically, it's talking about the Canaanite nation, right? And how in these, when the kingdom is set up, that they're going to be at the bottom of the bottom. You know, they're not going to be allowed to get into the temple. They're not going to be able to, they're going to have to, they're not allowed to come into the Holy Land. They're going to be on the outskirts of the world, living in the poorest conditions, living in mud areas, marshes, swamp areas, like how the Bible describes it. So that's the curse fully being played out that we read about in Genesis chapter 3. So that's how it that's the serpent. So hopefully we won't go on after this thinking that the serpent is some type of, you know, little mystical snake that can talk, right? Because when you go a little deeper too, because the serpent just means knowledge, because like that was an ancient symbol of knowledge, and you have something called the serpent people, right? And the that practice some type of occultist type stuff. You know, I'm not necessarily saying that's all that's is all tied together, but I'm just telling you that the word serpent is just used to describe a conniving person, and also like a person that has a certain amount of intelligence, right? That they can, able to deceive a person, right? So that's where it all comes from. So again, with that, I'm gonna say shalom, peace. Hopefully that was edifying. Shalom. All praise to the Most High. I'm out.